this is Diane Mourglia-Swerdlow with another edition of Healthy Living for Expansions.com. Today it is a cold and snowy day in Michigan, so I've started some French onion soup, and I want to share my recipe with you because it is one of my favorites, especially in weather like this. So over here I want to direct your attention to some beef broth that I am making. I have about a 3-pound chuck roast that I put in 4 quarts of steamed distilled water, and I'm just boiling it and letting it get very, very tender, because you can make this with chicken broth or vegetable broth, but my favorite is beef broth because it's nice and hearty. Now my version of French onion soup is probably a little bit different than what you get in a restaurant, but you can make it that way. When I am done with this, I'm going to take the meat out. I'm going to chop it up into little pieces, so clean it, chop it up into pieces. And of course, traditional French onion soup is a very clear soup without any meat in it per se. So that's, while that's boiling, I'm going to also, I have 3 ribs of celery. And I want to remind you that what you purchase in the store is the stock, and each piece is a rib. So we're just going to open each one up so the flavor comes out, and I'm going to put that in my beef broth to give it a little bit of flavor. So I'm just going to chop it like this so I can take it out. If you want celery, you can chop it up small and leave it, but I just for now want to put the flavor into the broth. And you can put other vegetables in there if you want to flavor, but for now this is what's going in my broth. And then I'm just going to cover it back up. I'm letting it gently boil till my beef is nice and tender. In this pan, I have 1 cube of butter. You can do 6 to 8 tablespoons depending on how you feel. And we're going to turn this up so that I've already melted it for you, but I wanted you to see the butter. And then I've chopped up already about 3 pounds of onions. And those are going to go in. Now those of you who watched my potato pie recipe, they are going to saute in here and cook down for a long time, because our goal is to caramelize them, which brings out the sweetness, the natural sugar in the onions. And so they're going to simmer here for actually quite a while. But we'll check them from time to time so you can see what they look like. Now some recipes for French onion soup even call for sugar in with the onions. I would rather let mine caramelize and cook a little bit longer. You want to remember that the onions are very good for your blood. It'll help clean it out. The beef broth will help ground you, because remember it's brown. And it will also help with your iron. It will help with your amino acids. So the beef broth is a very rich broth on a cold day. Then I have here about 1 head of garlic. I'm going to just chop this up and put that in with my onions. And that will also cook down. So this is actually a very simple soup to make. You can purchase beef broth if you don't want to make your own. You just have to be mindful of the ingredients. And most of them, from what I've seen, they're like beef flavored broths, or they have a lot of other things in them. And you can use them in a pinch. I have done that. But my preference, of course, is always to make your own if possible. So, especially if you have, if you're working outside of the home, this is a soup that you might want to start one night and then finish the second. It just depends on what your time is. Okay, so this is just going to go in with my onions. And like I said, it's going to simmer for a while. And the longer you simmer it, the sweeter your onions are going to be. These are going to cook down to, you'll be surprised. It won't look like much in the pan, but the flavor is going to be amazing. And then what I do is I put the lid on it for a while because it helps hold the heat in, and it will simmer down a little faster. But I've kind of cracked it with my spatula. I put my heat down probably a little under medium, just so that it will sit here and simmer. I'll let it get really hot first, and then I'll turn it down. But I keep my eye on it. Never go away and leave a pot that's on your stove unwatched, because you just never know what might happen. And of course you don't want to start a fire. That's a terrible thing. So anyway, we'll come back and check this in probably about 45 minutes to an hour and see what it looks like. Okay, this has been about 40 minutes now, and you can see how much the onions have cooked down, but we're going to cook them down even further, so we'll check them again after another, 30, 40 minutes or so. But as you see, they're starting to brown. They're not burning, they're browning. That's why you want to cook it on a medium to low heat. Right now it's on low, but you can see it's still simmering. And they'll probably will lose more of the liquid, but it will all help the onions to get sweeter, to bring out the sweetness. So I'm going to put my cover back on. I have it on low heat at this point. Now I've taken the meat out of my broth. I have it over here, it's cooling. And then when it's cool enough, I will clean it and I will cut it into little pieces and eventually go into the soup. Now because we use this for to make the broth, the meat itself is not going to be as flavorful as if you cooked it for different purposes in different ways. So anyway, but it's alright, it will pick up the flavor of the soup once we get that going. And of course the scraps will go to the dogs and they will be thrilled. So we'll check back in another probably 30 to 40 minutes and see how the onions are doing. You can see how the onions have cooked down, they've caramelized. This is another 40 minutes, so roughly around an hour and a half, 2 hours. But it's very beautiful and it's very rich and it makes your soup very sweet. So we're going to add 2 cups of white wine and let this simmer for another maybe around 30 minutes and kind of let it all blend together. And then when that's done, we'll go to the next step. Okay, so you can see after about 10-15 minutes, the wine has boiled down. At least half of what we put in has evaporated. And again, you have your flavors, and I wish you could smell this because it smells so wonderful. And over here, of course, I have my soup. Now, I left the bones in because it's going to flavor, and I left the celery ribs, and I'll take that out eventually, but I'm going to let it sit in here for a while so the flavors can blend. So I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of fleur-de-sel sea salt, and you may want to add more salt according to your taste, but you start lower and you can add. If you put too much in, you cannot take it out. I have found that out before. And 1 teaspoon of black pepper goes in. And I'm going to stir that around. Okay. And then the next step, turn my heat down just a bit. I'm going to turn this off. And now this is going to go in. It's going to splash here. You don't want. Okay. This is going to simmer in here for a while because again you want your flavors to mix. But it's a really beautiful soup. Okay, my bones floating. And now to pull out the celery ribs eventually too. So as we let that mix a little bit, then I have, remember the meat, I trim that up into little bites. So that's going to go in, and of course that's not typical in a French onion soup, but I'm going to put that in mine. And our last ingredient is 1/2 cup of sherry. Now I did purchase cooking sherry, but when I read the ingredients I didn't like what was in the cooking sherry. So I actually have a very nice sherry here that maybe most people would like for an after dinner drink, but it's going to give this a really wonderful flavor. So this is going to go in, and once this goes in it will need to simmer at least another 15-20 minutes to help blend the flavors, and then you're going to have lovely soup. Now of course traditional French onion soup, as I mentioned before, you would just take a bowl and you put your soup in, a piece of French bread over the top, and sprinkle your cheese. Set that on a cookie sheet and put it in your oven. Make sure it's an oven-proof bowl, of course, for about 350 for 5 or 6 minutes until your cheese is melted and bubbly, and then you can eat it that way. But I prefer it this way, and once in a while I may sprinkle a little cheese on top or just eat it like it is. It's just really a nice soup. So anyway, I hope you enjoy. I know we will on this cold, snowy Michigan day. I thank you for joining me. Diane Mourglia-Swerdlow, expansions.com.